that original plan that we had hits that roadblock and we do nothing, we end up with dirt in our backyard. We end up with a dirt retirement. So, the risk is low to try something new. Retirement doesn't always go according to plan. Life rarely does. But it seems like when those detours or roadblocks in life come in a city that we're familiar with, our hometown, we can handle those pretty well. But in a new city, like this new place of retirement, those roadblocks or detours can have us gripping the steering wheel and looking around for, what's next. Well, that's exactly where I found myself when I was laid off from my job. Severance covered about 3 months, and I thought, that should be plenty to find another job. But I hit a few roadblocks. Hiring managers are looking for 3 basic things. Competency, can you do the job? But then commitment, how long can I expect this person to stay with our company? And, given my age, they can do the math pretty easily. That's probably a 3 to 5 year, maybe less. So that was a bit of a hurdle. And then the third one, chemistry. And that's one I really hadn't thought about until my last position at my job, where I was working with 20 and 30-year-olds. That generation gap really surprised me. And so that third, chemistry, when a hiring manager is looking at you for a position at their company, I don't think that did me any favors being at the age I am. And after about 6 months of applying for jobs and getting that email of thank you for your application, we had many qualified candidates. We're moving forward in another direction. It was a roadblock that I had not expected. Hi there, and welcome to Fully Alive today. I'm Denise. And whether you planned your retirement or, like me, maybe got there a little sooner than you expected, this channel is all about discovering how to make this season the best one of our lives. So what do we do when retirement hits a detour or a roadblock? Maybe it's a layoff like I experienced, or any other of the many challenges that people face when they step into retirement. All very different situations, but lead to that same question, what now? And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to share where I'm finding some hope and direction in this detour or roadblock in retirement. There's something about the natural world around me that really helps me understand some of the more complex issues of life. And honestly, my backyard here has been along with me on this retirement journey and has taught me so much. I've got a few videos on this about what happened when we had to remove this huge, massive oak tree in our backyard, my job, and then putting in some landscape borders and patios and hardscape. So the next step in my backyard retirement journey is putting in some sod. You can see the dirt behind me, not very pretty, and in my mind I had, sod placed there. So after 6 months of looking for work and things not going according to plan, this is what my backyard is teaching me. I've broken it down into a 6-step process that you may be able to use in your retirement journey if you hit a roadblock or a detour. Step 1 is, first, recognize that there's a roadblock or a detour. Here in South Texas, we're in the middle of a drought and with some pretty strict water restrictions. And putting in that sod ground cover that I had envisioned, had in my mind, is just not practical, not wise. I could try to force it, but the water to get that new sod established and then to maintain it, that would have been a real challenge. And there was still the risk that we would not be able to water at all, and that brand new pretty green sod would burn up in this hot Texas summer. And there's a scripture in Proverbs that says, a man devises his ways, but the Lord directs his footsteps. And so I was devising a sod ground cover or a full-time or part-time job, and the Lord started directing my steps. So I ended up at this workshop at my local nursery on Texas native ground covers. You know, that was never even on my radar, but it really made me start thinking differently, started thinking new thoughts, and that was a good thing. So what can feel like a roadblock or a detour in our retirement plan, that might just be a pause to help us start thinking new thoughts. So step 2, challenge your default of what you think life should look like. It sounds simple, but it's really challenging. So in my mind, my only option to cover this dirt patch was sod, your traditional backyard ground cover. I never even thought of anything else. Challenging that default, it took a little bit of curiosity and more of an open mind, and maybe a little frustration at not being able to move forward with my plan. We can hold on to these defaults of what we think our retirement should look like. But if we're willing to challenge those defaults, especially if there's this detour or roadblock, it could actually cause us to pause and consider an entirely different version of our retirement life. Step 3 is explore your alternatives. I started educating myself on what Texas native ground cover would look like, and I was really surprised that it actually offers a lot of benefits that sod ground cover doesn't. It attracts birds and butterflies and bees, and it's really good for the soil, and it doesn't take thousands of gallons of water. So what I originally thought was a compromise to my sod ground cover actually might be a really good, creative, interesting alternative. Those roadblocks or detours in your retirement may also offer some nice, interesting, creative, even better alternatives than what you had originally planned. Step 4, look for what's already working. So I took a walk down to my local park here in the neighborhood to see what was growing there. They just mow it. They don't water it. Same heat, same climate, same soil that I have in my backyard. And so I thought, if it can live there, it can live in my backyard. And I was pleasantly surprised to find all these beautiful little colorful wildflowers growing in the park. I'd never even noticed them before, but started getting more of a vision for what that would look like in my backyard. Sometimes the path forward in this retirement detour is growing right under our feet, and we just haven't seen it yet. Step 5, test before you commit. Before I put all that work into my backyard, I wanted to test out a few things. So those Texas native, beautiful little colorful wildflowers that I found in the park, I picked up a few of those and brought them home and planted them in a little planter box in the backyard. Just wanted to see what they look like, how they grow. Do I like them? Do they like my yard? Will they fit? So testing that out, letting my imagination develop. Sometimes I need those tangible things to look at. And I'll sit in my backyard and I'll look at my little wildflowers growing there and look out at my backyard and think, I could see them growing there. It's funny, I also drove to the library today and I saw this beautiful yard of wildflowers. And I took a picture of it. I thought, that's my inspiration, that this can look beautiful. It'll be different than that green sodded ground cover. But like I said, I'm warming up to the idea of how unique and different and beautiful this could be. So test it out. Try it a little bit. You don't have to go with the full plan, put a little planter box. Because honestly, if that original plan that we had hits that roadblock and we do nothing, we end up with dirt in our backyard. We end up with a dirt retirement. So, the risk is low to try something new. But yeah, give it a try. See what might work for you. You might be surprised. So step 6, work with what you already have. So at that landscape workshop that I went to, I found out that some of the weeds that I had been pulling out of my yard were actually legitimate Texas native plants, celebrated and sold at my local nursery. So I came home and I went out to the backyard and I gave a lot of those weeds a nice little promotion. And they're getting a lot of love these days. You know, they were there all along. I just didn't recognize what they were. And that's what this really is a paradigm shift. The things maybe that we were calling weeds in our life might not be weeds at all. You know, you may have a retirement backyard full of beautiful Texas native wildflowers that are just waiting to be discovered and promoted. So my backyard, I've got my Texas natives that I'm loving on, but it's still full of a lot of dirt. And honestly, so is my life. I don't have this all figured out. I'm just figuring it out a step at a time, devising my ways and letting God direct my footsteps. You know, some parts are beautiful. I have my planter beds that are finished, and I just put in a little vegetable herb patch. But a lot of it's still very bare, waiting for, you know, maybe something unexpected, something I've overlooked, something that needs to be promoted, something that maybe just needs a little attention and care to fill in those brown dirt patches of my life. Sometimes our vision of retirement is completely different than what we had going into it. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be beautiful. And actually, it might even be better than what you have planned. So in this retirement roadblock or detour, doesn't need to mean we're lost. Maybe we're just being redirected down a different road that we never even knew existed. Thanks for joining me today. It's been fun sharing my backyard with you and some of my retirement life and how things are developing. If you found this video helpful, I'd invite you to like and maybe share it with another retirement buddy who may have hit one of those road signs that they weren't expecting in their life.